Hello and welcome to our third installation in the series of studies identified as G2. This is G2c. And our reading today is found in Luke chapter 3, verses 23 through 38. So in the third chapter of Luke, we have a second genealogy of Jesus. It's different than the one we saw in Matthew chapter 1, verses 1 through 17. Luke's genealogy traces Jesus' ancestry back to Adam. Matthew traces his ancestry only back to Abraham. So you might think that Luke just went a little further back in history to perhaps demonstrate that Jesus was human. That seems reasonable, but a closer look reveals that the two lists are different. There is agreement between Abraham and David, but outside that series, they differ significantly. So many people have searched for the reasons why this is the case, and one of the goals here is to give you the tools to investigate it for yourself if that's something you're interested in. So this is going to be a very short Bible study here. So these are the set of texts, Matthew and Luke's account, that skeptics often use to illustrate how the Bible contradicts itself. Well, that doesn't make much sense to me. I don't think that God contradicts himself. The two authors clearly investigated their accounts. Also, the way genealogies were understood in ancient Israel was far more complicated than what we see in modern ancestries. Many people have searched for the reasons why this is the case, and the goal here is to give you the tools to investigate it for yourself if that is something you're interested in. These two texts, Matthew and Luke, are ones that skeptics will often use to illustrate how the Bible contradicts itself. For me, that doesn't make sense. I don't think God would contradict himself. So it behooves us then, it falls upon us to look a little more closely. The two authors clearly investigated their accounts. Also, the way genealogies were understood in ancient Israel was far more complicated than what we see in modern ancestries. So I'll speak a little about why the two genealogies have importance to us today, refresh that for Matthew, and then give some online resources you might be interested in. So first, the more important things. Luke's account has to do with Jesus being a human descendant of Adam. Matthew's gospel demonstrates that he is the seed of Abraham, and he's a descendant of David the king. And both of these approaches are important teachings, and they were probably recorded in the early church to establish these fundamental truths. So note that in Luke 3:23, we read that Jesus was regarded as the son of Joseph. This was a recognition that Jesus was divinely or uniquely born, but regarded among the people that lived at that time and place as the son of Joseph. There isn't a parallel situation in human history that I'm aware of, and I will leave it at that. What can we say beyond this was very unique, and it's hard to represent these things in ancestries. So we'll speak more in depth about Joseph in our next study, but we're going to mention one important thing here. Every child needs a real human father. Special thanks to the valiant men who have stepped in and stepped up and assumed the role of father for many children who might otherwise grow up without one. A few years back, I was traveling and struck up a conversation with a gentleman who was waiting at my table in a restaurant. It turned out that he married a wonderful woman late in life, and the union included a son of hers, so he adopted her son. She had been abandoned by her previous husband. The child, now an adult, was profoundly impacted by Down syndrome. So as the gentleman spoke of his wife and his adopted son, I couldn't help but think of what God can do as he mends the broken relationships of this life. We spoke of faith and commitment and how the things we can truly make better in this world are usually those closest to us. Sometimes also the hardest thing is the one we should do. As I said before, Luke's genealogy was important to the first century church because it traces Jesus' lineage back to the first human. It may seem strange that such a lineage would be necessary. Aren't we all descendants of Adam? We are indeed. But the point here is that Jesus was one of us, and not some heavenly being who took on human form, as the Gnostics of his day would later claim. Neither was he a descendant of an angelic invasion of humanity, perhaps like we read of in Genesis 6:1 through 4. The history of Gnosticism in the early church is an important study for any Bible teacher. When the gospel was preached to the Greek world, the church had to confront false teachings brought in by Gnostic believers, or believers that brought with them the baggage of Gnosticism. The influence of the Gnostics and other ancient texts may be why we see this extension to Adam in Luke's account. Luke's reason beyond that, I simply don't know and don't want to speculate further. As the church fathers later would point out, Jesus is fully God and fully human. That seems to me to be the reality behind the two genealogies. If you'd like to better understand the differences in Matthew and Luke's genealogies, as well as Gnosticism, you can do that with a simple online search. That leads you to other places. A good place to start is often Wikipedia, but look at the footnotes if you're interested in more in-depth resourcing. You'll find various points of view on this subject, so be prepared to stand by faith in all this. The links below may serve as a good start for your study. I'm speaking of the links that are in the written text on the gracedevotionals.com website. For now, we'll leave our text in Luke chapter 3, and in our next study go on to John chapter 1, which is a very important study. So if you have questions about any of this, let me know through one of the messaging options that you can find, again, on gracedevotionals.com. And as I said, you could search through Wikipedia and look for genealogy of Jesus. You can go to gotquestions.org and, again, Jesus genealogy. And you can go to Britannica.com and look at the early heretical in Christianity subsection. Look at the early heretical movements. And then you might look also on Britannica.com for the subject of Docetism, Docetism. Those are all good studies. It'll help you understand Gnosticism a little better and some of the differences between genealogies in Matthew and Luke. So this concludes our study for today. Please remember to subscribe and click like when you listen to this in audio mode if you liked it. And for now, may God bless you in your journey and keep safe, and until the next time we meet. Thank you so much and have a blessed day. Bye-bye.